My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
And welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. Well, this week we saw contentious Senate hearings for RFK Jr., who has been nominated by President Trump to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Well, our guest today knows a lot about the issues that are at stake. She is an incredible Emmy-winning journalist. She's also an acclaimed TV host and also a best-selling author, and has a great book that just came out recently. It is called Follow the Science: How Big Pharma Misleads, Obscures, and Prevails. Sharyl Attkisson, it's so great to have you here.
Great to be here, Rita. Thank you.
What was your reaction to RFK Jr. on the hot seat? How did he do?
I think he did well. I'm embarrassed for the members of Congress, although I don't think they know enough to be embarrassed. At the level of misinformation and propaganda they've bought into over the years without doing any original research or just being so susceptible to this propaganda campaign that's been quite effective over the past 20 years. So he knows, believe me, because I've known him for 20 years doing stories and research, he knows far more than they do about safety, and yet they're declaring these false statements to him with such confidence as if what they say is true. And he sat there quite politely and tried to answer, to the extent they would let him, their questions, which in some instances were just full of nonsense and false information.
You know, it seemed like they just wanted to also go on their soliloquy to, get sound bites, as opposed to really curious about his answers. That was my thoughts. Yours?
Well, that's, the frustration with how congressional hearings have come to be anyway. Some years ago, they went to this format where they do usually 5 minutes Republican, 5 minutes Democrat. There's not enough time for anybody to really dig into anything important. And if they start to, well, then the other side comes in and it's all forgotten. So I don't think a lot of substance comes from the hearings the way these formats are, and I don't like them.
How big of a threat do you believe RFK Jr. poses to, Big Pharma and to others? There's a lot at stake. There's a lot of people who are fighting against him for other reasons other than maybe sincere reasons.
Well, he is the biggest threat to the medical establishment, is the way that it's been built and co-opted by Big Pharma over the past 20 years or so that we've ever had. And that's what they're afraid of. Big Pharma will survive. There will always be products. But the point is, they really don't want to have to reformulate their products. They don't want to have to rethink the way they do things. They don't want the medical establishment looking more into causes and preventions of our chronic diseases, because that cuts into the patient base for lifelong treatments for the chronic disorders. But I got to tell you, I feel like the American public, regardless of what Congress was saying today, the American public has seen what's happened to our society in the past 20 to 30 years with these epidemic chronic disorders, as Kennedy rightly pointed out, are not genetic in nature, because that doesn't happen in one generation. There have to be toxic exposures that occur. Genetics can play a role to the susceptibilities, but there are things happening in our environment. And, Rita, I think most of us have the experience of, we see this, what's happened to the population, and yet it's as if our doctors don't even notice, or they don't notice except to the extent that they're happy to throw expensive treatments at us for pills and potions, but they're not getting to the heart of it. And why don't they care? Why don't they wonder what's going on? I get at that and Follow the Science, how the information they're taught in medical school, I prove, is false in some instances, and that's co-opted by pharma. Information they're taught in their continuing medical education classes, I've proven is false and sometimes co-opted by pharma. And I think that explains a lot about why we're here today.
It's stunning, too, because during the testimony, he even brought up that, he was saying in his, when his uncle was president, I think it was 3% was the obesity rate. And now he said it's 74%. I mean, that is stunning.
That's just one thing. And it's indicative of, as I've learned, it's not just because kids are playing too many video games and eating more. That I'm sure that's a factor. But we've learned that there are so many things in our environment, poisons, pesticides, things in our food, things in our medicine and vaccines that are causing metabolic disorders. So we could have eaten as much food, but different kinds of food, or not have gotten the same kind of medicines and vaccines 30 years ago and had different results. Today, it looks like maybe someone in particular is not eating all that much more, but the food they're eating has changed because of the pesticides and the chemicals. The stuff in the water is changed. There are things in there that are causing gender dysphoria. This is well documented, but no one wants to go into and study this in a comprehensive sense. We know there are things in our food and medicine and pesticides and water that can cause not just metabolic disorders and brain disorders, but gender confusion because it's interrupting the endocrine system that regulates our hormones. So why haven't we gotten to the bottom of all of this? I think it's a follow the money problem that he uniquely understands. And the members of Congress in both parties, I have to say, not every single one of them, but they will tell you and have told me on camera, the parties have been bought out by drug companies. I mean, it was almost comedic to hear Senator Warren, who usually goes after big corporations, asking a series of questions of Kennedy, defending the vaccine companies, what he's going to do to the poor pharmaceutical industry and the poor vaccine companies if he becomes HHS secretary. And I don't think I've ever heard her take that side of things before.
How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
This episode is brought to you by Cadillac. When you have 4 new tires, every drive feels fresh. Right now, buy 3 select tires and get 1 for just $1 during the Cadillac Certified Service Fresh Start Tire event. Visit Cadillac.com/service offers or see dealer for full details. At participating U.S. GM dealers only. Highest or equal value tire will be $1. Offer ends 5/31/2025. Not available with other offers.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
Anyone can follow. It takes something special to be an original, which is why the 2025 Lincoln Navigator SUV arrives with new ways of surrounding you in luxury, including the ultra-wide 48-inch panoramic display and the multi-sensory Lincoln Rejuvenate experience. A true original never stops evolving. So meet the 2025 Navigator, the original that's all new and better than ever. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Lincoln and Navigator are trademarks of Ford or its affiliates.
How much do you think this is because he is nominated, of course, by President Trump? Or how much is it taking on the pharmaceuticals? If he brought up, he even said at one point, Sharyl, that if I was, being picked for the Biden administration, you guys wouldn't have a problem. Many of you guys are my friends up there and were my friends. But now because I'm in the Trump administration, you don't like me.
There's an element to that, to be sure, because we watched as he was well embraced for his environmental and liberal positions when he was a Democrat for many years, suddenly to be attacked when he was rejected by the party when he wanted to run up against Biden. And they forced him out of the party. They wouldn't let him run for president as a Democrat, more or less. So he went independent, of course, as people know. And now he's rejected by the party. But I would say the bigger factor, and maybe if you asked him which is the biggest factor, he might agree, it's the pharmaceutical threat, because both Republicans and Democrats in Congress are protective of the pharmaceutical industry because of all the money they get from them and all the influence the industry has. And I think that plays, I would guess or argue, a bigger role and why they must, some of them, object to Kennedy.
Which is where it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. How much do you think, as you talked about, the lobbyists, the big corporations? It's interesting. Nicole Shanahan, I know you know who she is, but for our listeners, she, of course, was the running mate of RFK Jr. when he was running for president. She actually put out a video and said, I'm going to call you all out. I know some things about a number of you guys. I also helped to, at a point, she was donating, obviously, to a lot of Democratic campaigns. So it sounded like she's almost going to spill some of the dirty little secrets to mostly Democrats, but also about some Republicans, too, because she knows the machine. She knows the machine that RFK Jr. is up against.
Well, it'll be quite interesting to see where it goes, because I think that regardless of the conflicts of interest within Congress, the American public, to a large degree, educated themselves like they never had before during the COVID mess. They finally asked the question. And believe me, I didn't used to ask these questions. I'm not saying, that's a natural thing to do. We generally trust our medical establishment. I always believed in vaccines. I never would have imagined the government would cover up and lie. Only when I was assigned to cover these stories for CBS News and I found the surprising documentation and the whistleblowers did I come to understand what was going on. Well, guess what? A lot more people did that during the COVID experience when they saw the disinformation about COVID and COVID vaccines from the government. Many people started asking themselves, gosh, if they weren't telling us the truth about that, what about the childhood vaccine? So regardless of what Congress thinks, I think there is a lot of momentum out there among the public to do something about our health beyond vaccines, but medicine in general and our food situation. I think there's a lot of momentum to do something really meaningful about it.
I agree. And listen, the American public is very excited about some of these things changing. Who would be against Make America Healthy Again? And, it's a noble mission when you hear, obviously, his intent and his messaging and just to educate people so they can make a lot of this is just getting the word out so they really know fact from fiction. Don't you believe?
Well, it is. It's very hard because, as I say, the propaganda to not be able to ask safety questions about a product that is injected into nearly every American child multiple times, the idea that we're not supposed to question it or look at the safety issues that have arisen that are well documented, it's really an effective propaganda campaign. And the members of Congress, sometimes it's the staff briefing them, I've learned, continues to feed them misinformation and disinformation. Many of them really believe that the things they're saying are true, such as, antidepressants can't cause any violent behavior. Well, that's on the warning label that it does. That's been well known for decades. And there was a member of Congress arguing that that was a conspiracy theory today. I mean, the level of misinformation they spout, again, with such certainty is really, really quite shocking.
It is. And by the way, your book is terrific. Follow the Science, How Big Pharma Misleads, Obscures, and Prevails. And I want to walk through some of the things that you uncovered through your great investigative work. Talk about, one of them was the federally funded baby oxygen study. Talk about that.
Well, I wanted people to understand how I came to the position where we should not take at face value everything the government tells us because there is such a well-documented and long history of fraud and abuse and ethics violations. And this was just one really egregious example of extremely premature babies put into studies funded by the federal government and some of our most prestigious medical institutions. And the mothers, usually single African-American women, by the way, were later said coerced or at least not even told there were any risks or that their kids were going in a study at all. And they ended up agreeing under the auspices of being told something different, that to let their babies be in a risky study that the government's own ethics watchdog concluded resulted in some of the babies' deaths. The study was so allegedly unethical that, listen to one of the things they did, not disclosed in the consent forms. They rigged the oxygen monitors on the study babies, because premature babies are usually regulated with oxygen. They rigged the monitors to give false readings, so that the medical personnel caring for the babies in the hospitals wouldn't be tempted to adjust the readings or adjust the oxygen for the baby's own good. The range was kept into what the study wanted the baby to be in, and it wasn't necessarily for the good of the baby. So just outrageous things happening, and then cover-ups when this stuff is exposed. Nobody is punished. The scientific establishment marshals its forces and covers it up and attacks the watchdogs. And these things continue to go on year in and year out.
Wow, that is incredible. Was there any recompense or anything that could be done? I mean, I don't know how you get a recompense after your child is dead.
No, the watchdog was going to take some action to at least do something about the deficient consent forms that were handed out by all these institutions. He got spanked down because they all gathered together and published articles in journals and said, who will be in our studies if we disclose all the risks? And I hate to say it, but 20 years later, they were pushing back then to loosen informed consent. In other words, not have such strict rules for telling people what the risks are. And they finally got their wish. In the last year or so, the FDA quietly changed at the behest of Congress, at the lobbying, of course, I'm sure from the industry, changed informed consent rules in this country, where now, if the researchers determine, without telling you, that the risk of you being in a study is minimal, they don't have to tell you about it. Problem is, they've been wrong or misleading about risks in studies. So now you're relying on someone telling you, hey, this study's not going to pose any risk to you, and I don't even have to tell you about them. I think that's shocking and has to be changed.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things, too, was about an Alzheimer's drug. Talk about what happened with that, what you discovered.
Well, this was aducanumab, and it was billed as maybe the first cure for Alzheimer's because it attacks these amyloid plaque in the brain. Come to find out, the studies were halted because of the drug company realized they were futile. It's called a futility finding. They weren't going to amount to anything, and so they halted them midstream. They come back a year later in partnership with the FDA and say, never mind. We've looked at the data in the incompleted studies and decided that it works after all. And with that, the FDA partnered with the drug company, made a presentation to an advisory committee for the FDA, and against the advice of all members on the advisory committee, the FDA pushed through and approved this hugely expensive drug that none of the advisors thought should be on the market because it has risks and no proven benefit, at least in their minds. And that was pushed out where Medicare would be covering it at a cost of, at the time, something like $47,000 a year per person, which would bankrupt the Medicare system quite quickly if all the people in Medicare who may have early Alzheimer's were to try the drug. That was ultimately rescinded in a scandal, though nobody was punished or held accountable. But a follow-on similar drug by the same company was approved in similar fashion after that and did get approved by Medicare. And I think a lot of people are probably trying that drug today under the belief that, hey, this is a cure for Alzheimer's. They don't know the risks and they don't know the controversy under which this drug was approved.
Wow, that is mind-blowing because the average person, they rely on, okay, well, if the FDA's approved it, it's got to be okay. What a frightening premise. What about the doctors? Are doctors aware or are they kept in the dark too?
Doctors are kept in the dark. So I thought it was really interesting to look, for example, at the example of the Merck manual, which is some doctors to be referred to that as the most popular medical reference in med school, published by the pharmaceutical maker Merck. So I looked at it, and part of this exercise for the book, to see what they would say about Merck's own controversies. I mean, Merck, like many other pharmaceutical companies, has had to pay hundreds of billions of dollars for alleged fraud and bribing doctors and misleading on the safety of medicine. And I'm like, why are they writing the book? Well, they claim there's a firewall between their editorial and the med school book writers. But I found easily all kinds of misinformation and false information. For one, you look at Merck's Gardasil HPV vaccine, which is very controversial. I wondered, well, what do they teach doctors about this vaccine? It literally said in there when I published the book that there are no serious adverse events reported. Contrary to everything we know, contrary to their own medical label, which lists everything from paralysis to death as a potential side effect, it's telling doctors the false information that there are none reported. After my book was published, and I've been talking about this, someone pointed out they removed that sentence from their online version of their reference. I'm sure because I've been reporting it, but did they put in the truth? Did they write for doctors what the real side effects are as are on their label? No, they just skip over that. So doctor, this is all very much minimized. Medical side effects, vaccine side effects, doctors don't learn much about them. They're given misinformation about it, and it's no wonder they go into practice and don't look for these things and kind of minimize them.
Jif peanut butter. It's that jiffing good, it doesn't really need advertising. So instead, Enjoy the calming sounds of the ocean. Jif. Ooh, it's that jiffing good. Get your Jif at Jif.com.
Of course you love a pint of Ben & Jerry's, but maybe you don't love sharing your pint of Ben & Jerry's. No problem. Now you can share the love with Ben & Jerry's new Scoop-A-Palooza. 28 whole ounces of crowd-pleasing flavor in a single tub. It's an instant ice cream party. And if that means your favorite pint is left just for you, so be it. Ben & Jerry's new 28-ounce Scoop-A-Palooza. Made for sharing in 4 larger-than-life flavors. See benjerry.com/palooza.
Are we still on the trail? Is this pack getting heavier? More switchbacks? Why am I doing this?
At REI Co-op, we believe there are places within ourselves.
Just a little further. You got this.
That we find only outside.
Wow. Look at the stars. This is incredible.
We have the gear, inspiration, and advice to help you get there. REI Co-op. Visit rei.com.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
Wow, which is also a huge issue too as well, because you trust what your doctor says, you trust what the pharmacy says. I mean, there's so many layers here. You came out very courageously. And Sharyl Attkisson, you faced a lot of accusations. I mean, you got lambasted. Talk about sort of the machine that came up against you.
Well, I would just say anybody who tried to cover vaccine safety in the early 2000s, we were all doing it. New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, the networks, we were all covering it because it's an important story. But as soon as this propaganda campaign was well orchestrated by the pharmaceutical industry, because this was really having an impact on them, there was going to be some meaningful action to make things safer. The pharmaceutical industry about that time started with their direct-to-TV consumer ads, all those drug ads you see on TV that didn't used to be allowed, by the way, advertising pharmaceutical products. They started spending billions and billions with the TV networks and the news media. All of a sudden, the news media quit reporting truthfully and honestly the way they were on these issues. I continued to try to do it, and CBS wanted those stories for quite some time, but the machine definitely comes after the scientists, the parents, the media reporters, anybody that looks into honest and accurate vaccine safety reporting. You're going to get attacked by these nonprofits that are actually funded by the pharmaceutical industry, by members of Congress who are funded by the pharmaceutical industry. They have a million ways to come after you and try to smear and discredit you. Somehow I survived, and CBS for many years wanted to continue to do those stories until really my last couple of years there. And some people may know I left ahead of my contract because I felt like not just on this issue, but on many other issues, the news was becoming very conflicted and managed.
Yeah, and now, of course, you are doing just incredible work on your Sunday show, which is nonpartisan. And it's sort of, do you feel liberated?
I do. We're going into, we're finishing our 10th year. It's called Full Measure. You can find out where to watch it, fullmeasure.news, if you don't mind me saying that.
Absolutely.
I just looked at some stats and have about an even number of Democrats and Republicans watching the program. And I think that's because we're trying to do news just the way I did it for many years, the good old-fashioned way. You're going to hear different views on things. I'm not going to shove down your throat and tell you you have to believe just one thing and never look at the other side. I put views on my program that I don't agree with because it's not about me. You won't even know what I think about some issues because it doesn't matter. I want you to hear and have information, particularly information that you're having a hard time finding or that's widely censored on other media. That's my specialty for trying to bring out on Full Measure. And I think people really like that.
Yeah, they do. I hear so many people talking about your program. Now, I just learned also recently, but you're a 5th degree black belt master in Taekwondo. How did you get so interested in making America healthy again and blowing the lid on what's really going on with a lot of these things, like what happened during COVID that woke up a lot of us, but you were ahead of the curve?
Well, I guess I was first assigned to cover my first story on medical issues. I'm not a medical reporter. CBS asked me to look into the restart of the smallpox vaccine program was very short-lived after 9/11 because of the side effects that were found with the vaccine, like myocarditis, heart attacks, and so on. Sounds familiar. I never knew vaccines could even cause that kind of side effect. I didn't understand how they worked. My kid's fully vaccinated. I have tons of vaccines. I started to learn so much, not just about how they work and sometimes don't, but also about the government cover-up, namely David Bloom, a colleague of mine at NBC.
Yep, I knew David too. Absolutely.
Yeah, died, embedded with the military in the war in Iraq. And I knew that he'd gotten smallpox vaccine because if you're embedded with the Army, I was embedded with the Air Force. They were getting smallpox vaccine and anthrax vaccine, and I was able to confirm he'd gotten that before his death. It can cause blood clots, according to scientists. He died of a blood clot, and he should have been reported under mandatory reporting at the time under the smallpox database so they could track and see if these adverse events were related. He was not reported. I uncovered a cover-up. As a result of my story, his case was reported to the database. Ultimately, the smallpox vaccine program was stopped for safety reasons, but that was sort of my dipping my toe down the rabbit hole and understanding, what is going on with our medical establishment and our health agencies and how far they will go. It just shocked me because you don't believe as a reporter or as an American that your government and your health agencies would do that. You kind of think of them as pure and you think studies are pure and science is pure. And it really upends everything when you start to discover what's really going on.
Yeah, and boy, you have done it in a really powerful way. Everybody, be sure to subscribe and share to this podcast. Also, make sure you check out the great Sharyl Attkisson on Full Measure with Sharyl Attkisson. And also get this book, Follow the Science, How Big Pharma Misleads, Obscures, and Prevails. Sharyl Attkisson, it's so great to have you here. This was very eye-opening and I think so educational for all of us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Rita. Take care.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.
Going to the gym can be discouraging, especially if you're putting in the work but barely seeing changes. But with Tonal, you can actually see your progress with every workout. Tonal provides the convenience of a full gym and the expertise of a personal trainer anytime at home with one sleek system. Designed to reduce your mental load, Tonal is the ultimate strength training system, helping you focus less on workout planning and more on getting results. No more second-guessing your technique. Tonal gives you real-time coaching cues to dial in your form and help you lift safely and effectively. After a quick assessment, Tonal sets the optimal weight for every move and adjusts in 1 pound increments as you get stronger, so you're always challenged. Tonal lets you choose from a variety of expert-led workouts, from strength to aero hit to yoga and mobility to keep you coming back for more. For a limited time, go to Tonal.com to get $500 off your Tonal purchase plus a free 4-year warranty. That's Tonal.com for $500 off plus a free 4-year warranty. Tonal.com.